The big question is how Ashton's going to navigate the hard Trick Room setup coming out from Markus, but let's actually find out if Ashton's going to be able to navigate around that situation. We will see that Markus starts out with Indeedee and Snorlax, while Ashton is going to meet that with Togekiss and Excadrill.
Yeah, so the Indeedee Snorlax lead here kind of screams follow me belly drum on turn 1, so normally, you might maybe want to set up Trick Room first, then Markus maybe expected Ashton to lead a bunch of Pokemon that can only go for single target attacks. Togekiss Excadrill, however, do get access to Dazzling Gleam and Earthquake respectively. Ashton even has that Helping Hand, so something like a Helping Hand Earthquake would do a ton of damage here. Markus's Indeedee really can't do too much right now. You can go for Follow Me if you're worried about like a Dynamax move or a Yawn. Otherwise, you could just go for something like an attack like Psychic or Mystic Fire. Snorlax, on the other hand, of course, could just opt for something like a Belly Drum immediately, but kind of a tough position to be in because the thing about beating Gigantamax Snorlax is just doing as much damage as it before it Gigantamaxes. If you're able to, hamper it severely, then it's going to be really, really difficult for it to sweep through because it would just have taken so much damage by the time it starts attacking.
Well, Helping Hand Earthquake to kick things off as we saw Ashton select before. Let's see how much damage it's going to be able to do. It actually brings Snorlax just about down to half, which puts it in range of not being able to do the Belly Drum. Of course, because it has enough health, it can still go for that Belly Drum, even though it's going to bring it very, very low. Like, look at that, Aaron. It is hanging on by a berry, which is going to be that Figgy Berry that Snorlax is going to consume here.
Yeah, it takes so much damage there, actually gets the Belly Drum off, but in doing so, takes so much damage as well, and so now it's just around, like 33% health. Another Earthquake will really, really hurt here. Ashton has a bunch of options. He even has the Yawn option on Togekiss, so you can go for Helping Hand Earthquake. You might want to Yawn if you're expecting a switch out. Either way, that is the kind of dream turn 1 there from Ashton, I think, as Markus's Indeedee really doesn't do very much. Sure, it gets the special attack drop on Togekiss, but Togekiss isn't really used for offense on Ashton's team anyway, so I think Ashton is more than content to take a little bit of damage there. I'm surprised not to see the target actually go into Excadrill to maybe break the potential Focus Sash, but Markus maybe was worried about a weakness policy on the Excadrill. Either way, though, it's kind of a tricky spot to be in for Markus because Trick Room isn't even up right now. Snorlax normally wants to have Trick Room up and just pick up KO after KO after KO, but there's a decent chance it just gets KO'd now by itself because it's taking so much damage even after Gigantamax.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to me that Markus is still going for the Gigantamax despite how low Snorlax ended up getting from that Helping Hand Earthquake just a turn before. I guess because there's still Follow Me pressure on the board, Markus feels safe that the Snorlax is going to be able to survive to get another attack off as Ashton's Excadrill goes for the Swords Dance to boost its attack. And we'll see that this Togekiss goes for a Yawn, which gets redirected based on that Follow Me.
Yeah, so Swords Dance is an interesting option there, as Max Steel Spike actually comes out from Snorlax. That's not an attack what Snorlax often carries with Belly Drum sets. You want, obviously, a normal type attack for G-Max Replenish, and then like you typically see maybe a ground type attack and a dark type attack. So Steel Spike there, an interesting option, does pick up the KO onto Togekiss, and also importantly gives Snorlax a defense boost. But the Swords Dance there, Excadrill still has its Focus Sash intact as well, means that it's putting on a lot of pressure. Dragapult coming out right now is going to be able to threaten the Snorlax a fair amount with Dragon Darts, but of course Snorlax has that defense boost, so even though Snorlax took so much damage on the first turn, because it was able to get that defense boost, might actually be able to survive another turn. The big thing here is, of course, if you go for an attack onto Excadrill, will it be enough to KO the Snorlax? Dragapult, if it maxes, can KO the Indeedee, and then Excadrill's attack will just get directed into the Snorlax. So the other thing is, if you do consider Dynamaxing the Dragapult without an item to really resist anything, are you able to actually take an attack from that Snorlax? We've already seen the Belly Drum, presumably a normal type attack and a steel type attack, so a big question is, what is the type of the last attack, right? If it's something like, if it's Darkest Lariat, which turns into Max Darkness, that should just get the one-hit KO onto Dragapult. So Ashton has to make an important decision here on who to Dynamax, and Markus has to, figure out what the proper target selection here is. Do you try to just KO the Dragapult, or do you bring Excadrill down to its previous Sash?
Well, Ashton is going to Dynamax Dragapult, which isn't deviating too much from the formula that we've seen Ashton go for already. And because we don't have a Trick Room active, that means the Dragapult is going to be one of the fastest things on the field, except we're going to see another Follow Me come out from the Indeedee first. just to redirect away any attacks that this Snorlax might be taking, which is going to be a max airstream coming out from Ashton's Dragapult. That's going to do the last bit of damage to Markus's Indeedee, securing the knockout for Ashton. But I feel like the most important bit here is because we don't see a Trick Room yet, this max airstream is going to be super impactful in terms of the speed that this Excadrill is going to get to use this Iron Head into the Snorlax. Wow. It hangs on.
Yeah, it hangs on, and it's actually Max Steel Spike coming out again, and Dragapult survives there as well. Such a clutch survival there, as Snorlax may be expecting to just pick up the KO there, or perhaps it just doesn't have Max Darkness, and that's the best way for it to hit the Dragapult. Either way, that's a big turn there for Ashton, because if the Dragapult goes down, I think it's actually really difficult for Ashton to maybe deny Trick Room from setting up, because Markus presumably has a Dusclops in the back, or a Hatterene. Of course, Hatterene will just faint to the Excadrill, and Dusclops feels like a really consistent Pokemon to bring in this matchup. So yeah, the Dragapult hangs on for a little bit longer, and now it's really difficult for Markus to win because he also doesn't have redirection support. It is Dusclops coming out, so the main thing is that this Dragapult puts on a lot of pressure against everything on Ashton or on Markus's end. So by being able to hang on, it ensures another huge max move off here. And yeah, double up presumably will just KO until a Dusclops. You just don't want Trick Room to go up right now. Even if Snorlax gets another attack off, you don't have to really worry too much about it because you know Dynamax or Gigantamax on Snorlax's end is going to end after this turn. And it's already taken so much damage. Even if it gets its fairy back through something like Gmax Replenish, probably won't be enough to take, for example, another Iron Head from the Excadrill. And of course, Ashton still has one Pokemon back. So good positioning for Ashton right now. Markus took a lot of damage earlier on. And if he wants to be able to pull this off, maybe something like Ally Switch, which we saw him use aggressively earlier, could do something here, but no Ally Switch comes out.
No Ally Switch, just a Max Phantasm right into the Dusclops slot, which is going to deal a hefty chunk of damage to that Dusclops. And because we saw the defense drop as well, that means that Snorlax isn't really going to be able to survive through some turns. But Iron Head, as we saw from the double up selection from Ashton earlier, is going to be enough to knock out this Dusclops, as Snorlax goes for a Gmax Replenish into the Excadrill slot, which brings it down to its Focus Sash. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of damage coming in from that Snorlax. And it found its berry again.
So able to heal back a little bit, but you know, the thing is that Snorlax impressively actually stuck on the field for all 3 turns after Gigantamaxing, which I'm not sure I was expecting, but I think Ashton was actually comfortable letting it on the field knowing that he had the Focus Sash on the Excadrill. It's actually Rabombi as the last Pokemon on Markus's end, so Markus perhaps considering a non-Trick Room based approach in this game, saying, you know what, even if I don't get Trick Room up, I can maybe go for a Speed Swap. But the problem for Rabombi right now is that the Dragapult is already faster than it, plus it's already given the speed boost to Excadrill as well through Max Airstream. So right now, Ashton is just threatening with full offense this turn. You know, I haven't seen the item on the Rabombi. This is the first time it's come out from Markus's team, so the Focus Sash here could make things a little bit more interesting. Wondering if the Snorlax can maybe survive an Iron Head as well, but it's actually going to be an Ally Switch coming out.
Ally Switch might just be what Markus needs in order to survive this last turn of Dynamax, but Max Airstream goes right into the Snorlax, and it hangs on! Oh my goodness, the Snorlax is going to be able to potentially get off another attack here, depending on where this Excadrill decided to target down, and this Iron Head going right into the Rabombi, which is not carrying the Focus Sash, so who knows what that item is.
Yeah, Snorlax will get one big attack off here, but the problem with Snorlax is that its partners did no damage in this matchup at all, right? Like, if you look at what Markus brought, he brought Indeedee, Dusclops, and Rabombi, and those are all super support-oriented Pokemon, so if you're kind of playing with a strategy like that, you have to fully commit to Snorlax, and the problem for Markus was that Ashton very cleverly led the Excadrill and the Togekiss and just got so much damage onto it before it was even able to get the Belly Drum off. So that's kind of exactly the strategy that you want to approach when you're going up against a Belly Drum Snorlax. And in the end, while Markus's Snorlax sure was able to do a lot of damage, it wasn't able to pick up a one-hit KO onto either Dragapult or Excadrill because it didn't go for something like a Max Darkness onto Dragapult, and this Dragapult is a little bit bulkier than the usual Dragapults as we've seen from the previous set. So we should see Ashton take this first game pretty comfortably, and you know, the main thing is, what adjustments do we see players make going into the next game? For me, I feel like Ashton's lead was really good. Togekiss Excadrill covers a lot of options, especially because Ashton has that Yawn on Togekiss. If you try to go with the Trick Room option, you can just start putting on early pressure with Yawn, try to put some things to sleep. It's really tough when you use a hard Trick Room team to go up against Yawn because you often want to switch into your, main Trick Room sweeper, but you have to look for a position to switch in safely, and when your opponent is just using Yawn every turn, I'm not sure those safe positions actually really exist. And if, Markus doesn't go with the Trick Room route, which is what happened in that last game, Helping Hand Earthquake, as we saw, was just so good.
So I think what Markus needs to do to adjust for this second game is definitely bring a Trick Room option, but also bring more offense. Because as you mentioned, it kind of looked like Markus was putting all of his eggs into the Snorlax basket, and unfortunately, with the Helping Hand Earthquake that happened so early on in the game from Ashton, it just put Snorlax in a position where it was uncomfortable going for most of the moves that it probably would have wanted to go for. And you had all of your supportive partners taking the brunt of the damage, and you were just left with Snorlax having to do all the heavy lifting. So I would love to see Markus bring in maybe the other option that they have on the team, which would be Hatterene, and see if they could get something done with that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and for me, I feel like the Indeedee is not really cutting it if you're going up against Togekiss Excadrill. Indeedee is really... Markus wants to counteract the combination of Togekiss and Excadrill. There are a bunch of routes. I think Venusaur is actually an interesting consideration. Maybe you just go for some sleep powders early on. I like the Hatterene that you mentioned as well because I think Markus definitely needs some more offense. And if he's not going to bring more offense, I think he has to commit harder to the Snorlax route, which means maybe don't lead with it, leave it in the back, get Trick Room up, and then bring it in safely. Indeedee is still really helpful because it can redirect those Yawns away, and if Ashton commits a Dynamax, then you can really take advantage of that. But leading Snorlax didn't end up working out super well, and I think Ashton has little reason to deviate from the Togekiss Excadrill lead, so wouldn't be too surprised to see him just go with that once again. So here's what makes up the Markus makes, and it's actually going to be the Hatterene, like you mentioned.
Hatterene and Indeedee from Markus, and no surprise here, Ashton leading with Togekiss and Excadrill once again.
Yeah, so this time around, there is at least Trick Room pressure on turn 1, and with Follow Me from the Indeedee, it's going to be pretty much impossible, I think, to deny the KO unless you Earthquake crit into Dazzling Gleam. Spread attacks are pretty helpful here. Of course, you could just go for a Helping Hand Earthquake. I think Markus in this position definitely wants to go for the Follow Me just to ensure that Trick Room goes up. Of course, you know that Ashton has Helping Hand, you know that he has Earthquake as well, but you cannot risk for example, Excadrill Dynamaxing and just going for a Steel Spike onto the Hatterene. So Markus this time around should be able to get Trick Room up on the first turn, barring a critical hit from Earthquake onto the Hatterene. And if he's able to get Trick Room up and sacrifice the Indeedee, then what that allows him to do is maybe get Snorlax in for free, and that's exactly the scenario that he wants. However, even with Snorlax being set up, one thing that's super interesting is that Ashton ended up committing to Dynamaxing Dragapult in that last game, and the Dragapult Dynamaxing is super interesting in a Trick Room matchup, but because Snorlax doesn't go for a Dark-type attack, that's a really big deal. I'm wondering if the Snorlax just doesn't have a Dark-type attack.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that too, but what I'm more curious about is I don't see a way that Ashton kind of gets out of Markus setting up the Trick Room here. Even this Helping Hand Earthquake I don't think is going to be enough to KO, but Hatterene hangs on, even with the critical hits! Oh my goodness, does get the Trick Room up, so how does Ashton go around this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big critical hit, especially because we've seen that Markus's Hatterene is Life Orb, so he will feint to another attack, but maybe that's what Markus wants. I think he'll probably be comfortable losing both of his Pokemon here, but presumably he's got that Snorlax in the back, maybe with Dusclops, and if that's the case, then Snorlax can have a much better time in this game where it's able to Belly Drum before taking any damage, and yeah, I think big critical hit there, still not enough to pick up the knockout onto Hatterene. I think if the Earthquake just KO'd Hatterene, that would have just been game over instantly, because I'm not sure how Markus can really go from there, but big survival there, and now Ashton really has to stall out Trick Room effectively. That is the goal. I think, at this point he's also considering who I want to Dynamax, and I think Dragapult is actually still a viable candidate. Of course, next X can go.
Yeah, well, here comes the next turn. Huge amounts of damage coming out from Hatterene, but with the Life Orb recoil, that is going to be a knockout for Markus. The Hatterene going down there, and now this Indeedee is going to have to take the brunt of this Dazzling Gleam coming in from Ashton's Togekiss, which is going to result in a double knockout for Ashton. Wow.
Yeah, so Ashton gets a quick lead, but this time around he is facing up against Trick Room, and there's probably a Snorlax coming out, right? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Able to threaten with the Belly Drum, and Ashton has, Incineroar and Togekiss, both which really don't do very much damage here whatsoever. There is the Yawn on Togekiss, and Incineroar normally would be able to pressure with Fake Out, but because Psychic Terrain is up, you can't go for something like that. So I think one thing that Ashton wants to consider doing is switching out the Incineroar with some parting shots. He's revealed Taunt as well, so the Taunt option could shut down Dusclops so that it can't go for anything other than go for a Pain Split, and that could be critical because you want to deny the Dusclops from spamming something like Ally Switch. But at this point, I think, yeah, you really want to prioritize making the Snorlax not do as much damage, because as we saw, that Dragapult, when Dynamax, can actually take a Max Steel Spike.
Well, going to be a little bit of a switch up here from Ashton. The Excadrill coming back out in Togekiss's spot. So we'll have to see exactly how Markus responds to this. Here comes the Belly Drum, as you predicted, Aaron, and that is going to maximize Snorlax's attack, and that Figgy Berry that we saw it munching on a little bit earlier is going to help bring it back almost up to full, which puts this Snorlax in a much better position than what we saw it in Game 1. Is that going to be enough, though, for Markus to get through this game and bring us to a Game 3? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, one thing I'm surprised Ashton didn't go for was maybe going for a Taunt, or sorry, excuse me, he went for the Taunt, a Yawn onto the Snorlax, but perhaps what he was predicting there was for the Snorlax to just go for an attack onto the Togekiss rather than go for the Belly Drum. Yawn would have made it really difficult, I think, for Markus to win this one because he would guarantee Fall Sleep after this turn, but Ashton also loses the Focus Sash on Excadrill, and now Snorlax is fully set up. So at this point, what Ashton needs to do is basically switch out really well, go for Protects on the right Pokemon. You need to predict who the Snorlax is targeting and make plays accordingly, right? So Dusclops right now at least can't Ally Switch, it's forced to Nightshade, but it probably wants to Nightshade in this position anyway. So, you know, the big question is, for example, does Markus go for just a G-Max Replenish into Incineroar? Does Incineroar switch out into a Dragapult, maybe expecting that read? Does Markus make that read? A lot of big questions right now. Markus also might just be worried about the damage output from something like Excadrill. Might just target that slot down. We still haven't seen Snorlax's last attack, whether it's a Dark type attack, a Ground type attack, maybe even a Fire type attack. So that's one of the big questions I have. What is the last attack on the Snorlax?
Definitely excited to see what that fourth and final attack is going to be, and it's a Max Flare! Max Flare goes right into Ashton's Excadrill, and Excadrill doesn't want to take that one too lightly, so that is going to be the first knockout secured for Markus, and maybe this is that turning point for Markus's game.
Let's see. Yeah, big Nightshade coming off here as well, just chipping away at the Incineroar now. Markus has 2 more turns of Gigantamax with the Snorlax, but of course Ashton has not maxed yet. That being said, given that the Excadrill went down there, I think you pretty much are forced to max the Dragapult. But we've seen the Snorlax's attacks. We actually haven't seen the last one. We have seen the Max Replenish. So yeah, it's a full moveset of Max Replenish, Flare, and Max Steel Spike, right? So there's no Max Darkness, which means this Dragapult will be able to hang on from a Max Steel Spike, especially because one thing that Ashton's doing right now is very smartly kind of cycling Intimidates, which is exactly what you want to do to ensure that the Dragapult survive. Markus there had the option to maybe go for a Max Replenish onto the Excadrill, but the Flare covers the option of Excadrill Dynamaxing, which I think was certainly a very realistic possibility, so you can definitely understand why Markus just committed the Flare, want to guarantee a KO onto that. And you know, for example, if Ashton did go for the Dynamax there, Max Flare isn't seen that often on Snorlax either, so interesting Snorlax moveset instead of like the ground and dark type attacks that you often see. Instead it's fire and steel, so kind of different coverage here.
Yeah, different coverage, but I feel like that's been playing in Markus's favor, especially being able to get that critical knockout onto the Excadrill. But it's time for Ashton to Dynamax, and it is going to be that Dragapult just not deviating from that formula at all. Dragapult going to get the Dynamax factor and get off a huge attack onto the Dusclops as long as it's able to survive through some of these attacks coming up from Markus.
See, Markus opting for the Max Replenish this time, understanding that a Steel Spike isn't going to KO anyway, so has a chance to get its berry back as well, get some damage. But now my question is, by not targeting the Dragapult this turn, how are you actually going to really be able to KO this thing in the long run, right? Because Dragapult Phantasm will also lower the defense, and Dusclops is still taunted, so it's definitely going to faint from another Phantasm in the subsequent turn. So now you can bring in Incineroar, and it's able to not only get another Intimidate off against Snorlax, but with the defense drops and with Trick Room ending, I think Ashton has effectively stalled out the Trick Room. Flare Blitz will even do a lot of damage, and because he got that taunt off, there is pretty much nothing stopping Ashton from going for a Phantasm onto the Dusclops and just a Flare Blitz, I think, into the Snorlax. It's a super safe play. There's pretty much no way around it, so I feel like Markus basically maybe needs a couple of critical hits right now to have a chance with this game, and the main thing that's limiting him is the lack of a Dark-type attack. No Max Darkness means he cannot get a one-hit KO on Max Dragapult.
Yeah, the Flare Blitz ends up being super important here too because of the Max Flare that we saw come out from the Snorlax before. You have the harsh sunlight up, so that Flare Blitz is going to do even more damage than what it normally would be able to do. So very safe play coming out from Ashton. Another Max Phantasm from Dragapult. Now that the Trick Room is over, it is going to move first. Dusclops gets knocked out, and now it's all up to Snorlax to bring Markus back into this one.
Yeah, let's see. It's going to be eating up a Flare Blitz at -2 defense in the sun. Takes like 50% of damage there, as Incineroar takes a ton of recoil itself, but Max Replenish will be able to pick up the KO on Incineroar, but now the big question is, can the Dragapult just KO the Snorlax? Of course, Snorlax with multiple stages of decreased defense, so it's a one-on-one, but I think Ashton is in a position to seal this up at this point. Yeah, with one more turn of Dynamax, I just don't see how Snorlax is surviving here. Max Wormwind will definitely pick up the KO.
Poor Snorlax didn't get a chance to get its berry back, so Dragapult's Max Wormwind is going to do the final bit of damage to Markus' Snorlax. Ashton taking a quick 2-0 to bring themselves through the lower bracket.
Yeah, I think I like Marcus's game plan in that last game, and I think the main problem, it's weird because you don't see a Dragapult Dynamax that often, right? Especially against a Trick Room